This is a picture of Lunar Logic team from 2013. This is one of our company retreats. On that one, we discussed different experiments that we wanted to run, we discussed how we worked, what we want to change. One of the experiments that we designed back then was a happiness board. So we used that board to track the moods we bring to our office. Despite the fact we are still using happiness board, the way we use it has changed completely over the time. So in a way, the original experiment that we designed was rendered as a failure. Another experiment that we tried and we designed back then was Today I Learned board. So this is basically where we wanted to gather things that we learn at work. Even though still technically in the office, the board is pretty much abandoned by now. So I was walking by that board and I realized how many of those experiments we've had. This is another one, open review board, a place where any developer could submit a code to be reviewed by someone from another project. What we realized that people were submitting code to be reviewed, but no one actually was reviewing the code. So we abandoned it. Another of such experiments is a Slack board. This is yet another incarnation of a Slack board. Slack board is basically a board where we gather ideas what to do during Slack time. And this incarnation of Slack board, as all the previous ones, is fairly inactive. So yet another failed experiment. And I could actually go on and on and on and on with all those experiments. And it literally looks like we are physically unable to design an experiment that would be a success in the long run. It should kind of make me sad, should it? However, when I think about that, what an experiment is, how we define an experiment, with a sole exception of experiments run to demonstrate a known fact, all the other experiments are defined by their unknown outcome. So by definition, we should expect that some experiments would fail eventually. Then why we are experimenting in the first place? We experiment to learn. And then there is a specific time span where the learning is extracted, where we get most value of that experiment. Keeping going with the experiment after that time doesn't add additional value. Well, we tend to do it frequently because sunk cost fallacy kicks in, and we have this thinking that since we invested so much time and so much effort into doing that thing, we will be doing that thing again. Well, what we should be probably doing, we should call that experiment done, probably failed one, and move on. So all those things kind of tweak the average expected outcome of an experiment more toward failure than success. So we should be actually expecting more failures than successes when we think about experimenting. But even if we were able to ignore all those things, and we wanted to look at the theory, how we should design experiments, we should go to look at Don Reinertsen's thing. And what Don Reinertsen tells us about designing experiments well is that well-designed experiment is equally likely to succeed as it is likely to fail. So we should be aiming to be in the sweet spot where the uncertainty is biggest, because this is basically where we learn most. There is also the notion of the current context. So we should take the current context into consideration when we are designing experiments. What options do we have? And oh, by the way, we may design experiments so that they generate new options in future. So a well-designed experiment tomorrow is not necessarily a well-designed experiment today. And when we're talking about the options, there is a definition of intelligence that defines intelligence as maximizing future options. In other words, sticking with the old experiments and not exploiting new options, not generating new options, is basically a dumb thing to do. Another perspective that we can take when we are talking about experimenting is how far we can innovate from where we are right now. We cannot innovate too far ahead. So again, we should take into consideration context, options that we have, because we cannot create this huge leap that would bring us to desired future. We need to take a lot of steps on our way there. So the message I'm trying to pass here is that these are not the actual experiments that matter. What matters is the mindset of experimenting, the mindset that keeps us defining, running, and learning from new experiments over and over and over again, because this is where we get value. This is an equivalent of having a fishing stick instead of having fish. If we want to keep ourselves well fed, we need a fishing stick and fishing skill, not fish. If we want to keep our organization evolving in the long run, we need an experimenting mindset, not experiments themselves. At Lunar Logic, we define extreme self-organization, which I talked about yesterday, as a key differentiator that we have that makes us different in a niche which we operate. This is the outcome of a series of experiments that we run, which made us end in the place where we are right now. This is a picture of me from almost 4 years ago when I joined Lunar. Back then, we weren't able to think of, let alone design, experiments that would bring us to the place where we are right now. We wouldn't be able to think of future that is what we have right now and how it defines ourselves right now. So the final thought is experiments are useless, but experimenting is indispensable. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.